Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 73rd week of this crazy train. It is great to see four faces, well, actually three other faces besides mine. We've got Jack Santaniello, we've got Adam Boatsman, and we've got Matt Linville of Banker Exchange, a 1031 exchange expert. Thank you, by the way, to Brian Red at Pinnacle Bank for introducing me to Matt. And after I met Matt a week or so ago, I'm like, you've got to be on this webinar, because I know that we've had plenty of folks that have been asking about 1031 exchange. What's going to happen with the Biden plan? How's that going to impact it? You know, should we race to do something now? Blah, blah, blah. So we'll get into a lot of those questions in a little bit. We've already got some thoughts on questions that we kind of see routinely, so we'll tee those things up as well. But Adam or Jack, I'll start with you, Jack, first, since you have the really, you're the most dressed up, you and Matt. So with the button-down shirt. So Jack, any rants, ravings, or insights given some of the rumblings with the bipartisan bill or other things?
Well, I don't have too much to say other than I don't really feel bad that Mr. Schumer has threatened that nobody gets to go home until they get it done. They're supposed to go home on Monday. So hopefully that happens. But it's just, we've talked about this before when, Congress or even state legislatures try to get stuff through. It's like everybody wants to throw in their stuff. And so that's what we're experiencing, which is, okay, we're going to do this. And then someone else says, well, what about me? There's also the phenomena that, okay, if you let my stuff in, I'll let your stuff in. So everybody has their own little circles of trust and promises that are made to each other. And then you have, it's kind of like, it's like Survivor. You have all these little, or Big Brother, you have all these little, side deals going on and discussions, and, and then you get to, the day to vote. And then, so you're there. So that's where we're at. I don't know, I haven't gone into the details of the 1 trillion and then the additional stuff that wants to be put into there. But so that's what we're experiencing, which is more of the same, which is everybody trying to get their stuff in, so they can say, hey, victory, for what I wanted for you, my voting public.
Yeah. I like the Survivor analogy where it's all about them and it's not about us, even though they are elected for us. So Adam, any thoughts on, so here's the softball question to you, Adam, and maybe this will wind you up. But so supposedly, if this bipartisan bill goes through, it will have no tax impact. Adam Boatsman, do you believe that?
I don't know. I mean, actually, no, other than you need to pay the taxes that you're actually owed. In terms of the bill itself, I think the likely scenario that'll happen is that the individual components of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are set to expire anyway. So I think that on the assumption that kind of nothing can make it through the House and the Senate, that is really materially different than we already have, then I don't see anything with this bill. It's just everybody's going to be quiet about the expiration of the existing Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I do think that you only got one shot at reconciliation process, which is kind of why we're talking here today, and that's for like everything else they want to get done. So while do I think this particular infrastructure bill really is going to have a tax impact? The answer to that is no. I mean, they're just going to enforce the existing laws that are on the books. Do I think that it's likely that we're going to get some type of reconciliation package for other priorities that includes a lot of the stuff they've been talking about? Yeah, I think that, we're marching towards more likely than less likely. So, when it comes to 1031 exchanges, I kind of see the pot for Matt before he hops in, because after this, I will then turn into a loyal listener, because I'm looking forward to learning as well. Is that, for all the for all the boo birds out there for a minute, they've already made changes to the 1031 exchange process. And they did that as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was to say it only applies to real property. What does that mean? If you bought planes, you can't do that anymore, or cars or other, business property where you're doing exchanges. But I haven't really followed up with Cessna and companies like that to see, hey, what did that do to airplane sales? But that little move of like, hey, I'm gonna buy a new plane and I never have to pay taxes on it because I keep on doing 1031s like that. Like, we already lost that ability anyway. But the thing is, what we already learned from that is that you didn't have to go back and retroactively pay taxes on things you were already exchanged in. It just, the can stopped so that when you wound down, face the music, it's time to pay the piper. So my own speculation, unless Matt tells us difference, is that that's probably what we're going to face with real property. So I think for us, it's like, look, we're getting asked a lot of questions around, should I hurry up and do something? Should I wait? What's going to happen if I'm already in the middle of one? What happens if these are questions that I can't answer and my own team of experts can't answer. We're speculating just the same as everybody else. And I think it's really around probably the one that I'm like the most, I don't freaking know, that's crazy talk would be, I sell my property, I do the right thing, I invest it with an intermediary, and I span tax law change, to where and not like, I get it in terms of like the 1031, I could probably still go through with that because the likelihood is it'll be qualified in. I think it's more like, okay, what about, am I gonna, like, how do I do the calculus of changing the nature of it? Would have been better off had I recognized the capital gains at a 25% effective rate versus a 45% effective rate. So what do I, how do I evaluate this deal and what do I do from that scenario? I think that to me is a real confusing one about what happens if it's in process and I'm not going to go through with it, or I substantially changed what my original intent, was. So with that in mind, I do look, if I'm betting that if they do reconciliation process, which I probably would give that way better than 50% odds. And then if I'm betting that in doing the reconciliation process, this part of the tax code is going to be adjusted, I would give that better than 50%. So if you go, call it 70% times 70%, effectively 50%. Yeah, it's 50% likely that whatever the hell Matt's about to say, that's going to happen. In my eyes, which to me, it's like, I don't really like that. That's a bad odd. Like, I know that I'm considered very aggressive, but that's bad odds because I look at 50% as 100%. So anyway, thank you for that intro, Gary. And thank you, Matt, for whatever you're about to say. And I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah. Hey, before we move off of that, one other thing, just for anybody that's in North Carolina, that yes, we are one of 4 states that has not gotten off the dime and conformed to the federal statutes or the federal guidelines on the deductibility of PPP related expenses or expenses that were used for PPP. So I have pled with one of our U.S. congressmen, and he has been giving me crickets. So have you heard anything else, Adam? I know that we're basically telling our clients.
Yeah, okay. we're telling people to file and pay it. It sucks, but that's just where we're at.
Yeah, so we've got kind of a line in the sand by April or August 15. If it's still crickets, we're filing. We've been holding on some because we actually were, if we were betting people, we probably would have said, yeah, it looks like it's going to happen because the House got off the dime, at least the North Carolina House, and it looked like it should be just a rubber stamp from the Senate and boom, we should go. And we didn't want people to incur the expenses of amended returns. However, the crickets are, the cicadas are much louder than the crickets. So Anyway, Matt Linville, the floor is going to be yours. And what I would love you to do is just make the assumption that nobody on this call knows what a 1031 exchange is and kind of race through that. And then I hope you were taking notes with Adam's kind of stump the chump question, which we've been wrestling with. Do I hurry up and do something or not? And so anyway, and Adam, if you want to reiterate later on, that's great too. But Matt, the mic is yours.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. And Adam, to your point, if everything that I'm about to say is going to come to fruition, I'm changing my total speech. I'm changing everything. So listen, so 1031s, let's talk about that just for a second. We're actually experiencing the 100th birthday for 1031 like-kind exchanges. They actually came into the IRS code back in 1921, not too long after income tax actually came into the game. So it's been part of our tax code for a very long time. And one of the personal things that my ear always picks up on is whenever I read something or I hear people talk about 1031s and say, it's just a tax loophole for the rich. Well, that's not exactly what it is at all. It's a well-written piece of tax code that has helped many families, companies, minority-owned businesses all along the way. So it's been in the records for a long time. Matter of fact, Adam, to your point, in 2017, that was the last major change in the 1031 tax code. Before that, we really had 1991 as kind of the standard bearer of when this whole industry really sprouted. So as far as qualified intermediaries go, someone like myself and many other companies in the United States, our industry really began in 1991. 1031, this is what the IRS has allowed us as taxpayers. They have said, if you own property that's held for productive use in business or trade or as an investment, you sell that piece of property. And as long as you are buying another piece of property that's going to be held again for productive use in a business or trade or for investment, you actually have the ability to defer the taxes on that sale. So what exactly does that mean? And Adam, you hit it on again. We're talking about depreciation recapture. We're talking about our capital gains tax. We're talking about state tax as well. So we're talking about a big ball of money that will not need to be paid to the IRS immediately. It's not exempted, simply deferred to a later time, that a taxpayer has the ability to now roll into a new property or properties and either take the ability to leverage up and buy additional property or take on less debt if possible. And I'll kind of clarify that statement in a minute. Right now, we are only able to exchange real property. As you stated, personal property was taken out of the equation in 2017. As a matter of fact, for a White House and for a Capitol Hill that we would assume would be very, very business friendly, we almost lost 1031s altogether in 2017. So there was quite a debate that happened, and we only came away with the loss of personal property. So yes, a lot of our clients who were exchanging aircraft, who were exchanging artwork, coinage, who were selling lots of cattle, things that they were able to defer capital or defer gains on, that was taken away. And certainly it had an impact on the industry. I don't know either how it affected the aircraft industries or such to that point, but I think to the larger point of what we're talking about today, whenever you begin chipping away at tax code, it doesn't seem to stop. I think it was Coolidge, and I'll probably butcher what he said, but I think Coolidge said the most important thing is to kill bad bills, not to pass good ones. Good ones will eventually come back around, but once you pass a bad bill, it never goes away. And so that's why even today we have more heightened awareness about 1031s and the fact that it's just as easy for them to go away than it is to preserve them these days. So let's talk about real property. Again, when it comes to real property in these exchanges, is any real property for any real property. So if you have a taxpayer who's selling raw land, they have the ability to do a 1031 into a multifamily property. If they're selling multifamily, they can go into a retail center. If they're selling a retail center, go into land, as long as it's classified as real property. And again, it meets the qualified use tests. So that's kind of the initial piece on 1031s. There's a lot of other rules with identification periods, the timeframes that you have to actually complete your exchange. And that total time period is 180 days. So from the time someone sells a piece of property and begins to work with us as qualified intermediary, they have 45 days to identify potential replacement property. And they have 180 days altogether to actually close and take title to any or all the property that they identified. So it's a very short window. So we're talking about 6 months overall, especially nowadays, finding the properties that you want to buy, getting them under contract, closing on time, all the things that need to take place now, especially with our economy thriving as it is, the amount of closings that are taking place, that time can go by pretty quickly. So it's always a good idea if you're looking at exchange to work with your realtor to be out there looking at property ahead of time so you can have all of your ducks in a row when these timeframes begin to hit.
Hey, Matt, one of the questions that I've got for you, and for anybody listening, hit us up on the Q&A. I'm monitoring that. You can harass us still on the chat. Even though Matt's in the room, you can still harass us. Be easy on him. But you had mentioned something that this was the greatest level of activity, I think, in your history that you've seen. Is that correct? And if so, what do you think's driving that?
That is correct. Our real estate market has absolutely peaked, and you have folks who have purposefully, of course, bought property from the investment side, which has accelerated in value exactly what they had planned on doing, and probably even more so. And they've had opportunity to sell it at great gains. We've also had folks who have inherited a lot of property, who've held it for a while, who are getting unsolicited calls from realtors and developers saying, would you please sell us your land? I'm willing to pay you X amount. And then once they talk to their advisor, they find out how much tax they're going to pay. So I think a spike in prices, the capital gains tax that people would have to pay. And then I think you also have a boom of economy. So, when we're looking at the Charlotte area, looking at Greenville, South Carolina, Raleigh, Charleston right now, you're seeing just a great investment of outside capital. So we have folks from California on the West Coast who are selling properties at great prices, who find that the ability to invest and buy in our region, they're able to get more for their money, buy bigger and, I'm not going to say better properties, but buy bigger or more property. And it's just causing an absolute spike in what we see from the 1031 perspective. We're certainly up way over last year, and we don't want it to go away. We kind of like it. So it's been phenomenal. I think the second point to that, Gary, is inventory. So when you're needing to find a piece of property that meets your investment profile, and you're wanting to invest in an area, whether that be a primary market or we're going down to a tertiary market where the deals still are, those are few and far between. So we have a lot of people who are willing to go ahead and lock up property now for higher cap rates. But we're also looking at folks who are willing to come into areas that need investment and are actually providing lower cap rates, but they need that inventory. They need to place that money somewhere. So we're seeing growth even in the lower markets from people who are needing to place money.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question for you, though. If you only have, is this true that you only have to reinvest the profit when you're doing a 1031 exchange?
Great question, Gary. That is not the case at all. And that is certainly one of the bigger questions that we end up having a discussion with on the taxpayer and the advisor as well. So what the IRS states is this. Let's just give an example. You're selling a property for $1 million. That $1 million property has $500,000 worth of debt. So you sell, and what the IRS says is if you want a full tax deferral, if you want to defer everything, then you need to buy a piece of property for at least $1 million. So buy equal or greater than what you sell. The debt comes into play because the IRS also says if you have debt on the property, we want to make sure that you get an equal amount of debt on the replacement property. So again, simple numbers, when they sell for $1,500,000 in debt, they want to buy for $1 million with at least $500,000 in debt. And here's the reason. We want to avoid debt or taxable boot. And that comes in the form of walking away from closing with cash. That's a taxable event. The IRS is going to tax that. And also they tax debt relief. So if you did not replace your $500,000 mortgage, you only did it with $300,000, that's $200,000 worth of debt relief or taxable boot that you're walking away with, and they're going to tax that, that debt relief. So equal,
good.
Greater.
Got a couple questions that have rolled in here already. First one is, how does a construction exchange work?
Okay, so a construction exchange, the IRS says this: you cannot use money in a 1031 to actually buy or make improvements upon property that you already own. So it has to be either property held by somebody else and they're willing to make needed improvements to that piece of property and sell you land and improvements within your 180-day period, or you need an entity to go in and buy and secure that piece of property for you so that you are able to use your exchange proceeds to make improvements. So for example, many qualified intermediaries like ourselves will work with a taxpayer and actually go in and buy a piece of land or a multifamily building for the taxpayer. And we do that under a separate agreement with the taxpayer's funding, whether that come in the form of a bridge loan or something else. We lock up the property. We sign an agreement with them where they can become the construction manager or GC or whatever they need to do. We make the improvements using their funds. And whenever we get to a point where we've used all the funds in that 1031, then they sell their piece of property, and their replacement property is the improved property that we're holding. That was a IRS reg that allowed that to happen from the reverse and construction point. It's been very useful, very helpful. It is very detailed, a lot of agreements. We need to work with the taxpayer and their advisor to make sure that it makes sense. But those are one of the transactions that we happen to specialize in.
All right, thank you. Next question is, what are the benefits to a reverse exchange?
Benefits to a reverse are that, number one, you're able to secure a piece of property that maybe you might lose in a normal forward, being that you're able to go ahead and lock up that piece of property. Again, in a reverse, you're also able to make improvements, just as we discussed on the construction side, that may be necessary for that property, or you may be able to fully utilize all of your 1031 funds. But mainly, from what I've experienced, is just being able to, listen, I've got this opportunity to buy this property. I need to do it now before it goes off the market. I haven't yet put my property up for sale, but it's going. And so the reverse really allows them to secure that initial piece of property to make sure their overall investment plan can actually take place.
All right, another question for you. Talk about what like kind really means. So for example, if you've got property that's land that's undeveloped, can you sell that and do an exchange into a property that's got a building on it that's actually been developed?
Yes, absolutely. So again, the like kind definition goes back to a classification of real property. Not necessarily the grade of the property, but what the use of the property is. So again, raw land, typically going to be classified as held for investment. As long as you have held that property for a good amount of time or proper amount of time, then yes, you can roll those monies into any type of other real property, again, whether that be a multifamily, a retail strip, other raw land, single family rental, anything that, again, held for investment, business or trade, productive use, and it's classified as real property.
All right, Tim just asked for if you could do a little bit more of an explainer on what a reverse exchange actually is.
Okay, so a reverse is a transaction where the qualified intermediary is able to go in and purchase a property for the taxpayer. So we go in and usually form a single entity LLC that, with the taxpayers funding. So Gary, if I were working with you on this exchange, you would go out and work with Brian or whoever else to secure a line of credit or monies, usually a bridge loan, for us to go in and buy 123 Smith Street. So we go in as the QEAA, Qualified Exchange Agreement. That's what we form. We go in and we buy 123 Smith Street with your funds. The LLC owns it. We have a management agreement in place with you, Gary, so that if it is a property that is, let's say, multifamily, you're able to go ahead and collect rents, whatever you need to do on that piece of property. In the form of construction, we hold it, we work with you, we work together on the construction piece. We have draws that come out of the QI account to make the improvements, everything that's needed. And whenever all of the funds are utilized to make that construction piece, so that when you sell your piece of property, we've already locked up all those funds that are utilized. We make a transaction from the property you're selling. You buy it from the LLC, which is a disregarded entity, and you have completed either the reverse or the construction exchange and made sure, again, to make use of all of your 1031 funds.
That's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. So if someone in my family is going to buy property from someone else in the family, can the replacement property be bought from a relative to keep the 1031 benefits in the family?
Hey, everybody loves to keep the benefits within the family. So in this case, there are related party rules which prevent related parties from doing what the IRS really hates, and that is basis shifting. So if you are a related party, mom, dad, brother, sister, son, daughter, the IRS really frowns upon you exchanging property with them. It's not to say it can't be done, but again, the IRS is most concerned about, why did you buy from them? Did you buy from them simply to avoid taxes? And believe it or not, 1031s were not created to simply avoid tax. That is what the IRS frowns upon. So again, it's a question of basis shifting, and related parties in 1031s are not a good thing. So we would certainly want to stay away from me doing a 1031 with my dad or something, because the IRS, again, is worried about me shifting basis from one property to the other and excluding tax.
I'm assuming, and Adam, you can say yes and amen to this one or not, but I know that we have, if anybody has been paying attention to Adam's, kind of explainers on fringe benefits, not that we ever have anybody that asks about fringe benefits for an owner, right, Adam?
Right.
But if they've been paying attention to that, some of them actually have vacation rentals or vacation properties. So in this case, if I could, can I exchange my vacation home or plan to use my replacement property as my primary residence?
Sure. All right. So the IRS has a qualified use, and that qualified use, as we discussed, is making sure that it's held for investment, business, or trade. When it comes to vacation homes, the IRS has a concern with our personal use of those homes. So the IRS says that they don't want an investment property that would be qualified for a 1031. You don't want to use that property personally more than 14 days out of the year or 10% of the time in which it is rented out. So that investment mark, what we usually talk about is if you own an investment property at the beach, you're renting that property out for $4,000 a week or whatever it may be. The IRS wants to know that you attempted to rent it out for fair market. And usually we see that with putting it with a property management group. They have it out there for rent. We like to see that for at least 2 years. Some people will say a year to 2 years. Of course, at a year, we go from short-term capital gains to long-term capital gains. But the IRS has said, listen, if you've held it for 2 years for a qualified use, then that property should be okay for an exchange. So vacation property, it is exchangeable. Keep your personal use at the maximum 14 days or 10% of the time it's rented. That doesn't count for times that you go down to improve or you need to handle maintenance on the property. Want to make sure you've rented it out for fair market. You didn't rent it out to the family for nothing, and that you can show that even if you didn't rent it out, that you had the attempt to do so and at fair market value. So that's very possible. But if you've gone over that use, then it's unlikely. For a primary residence, we have the same thing. When it comes to buying that replacement property, and eventually you want to go and turn it into to your personal or primary residence, that's perfectly fine. But again, you want to make sure that on the backside, you meet that qualified use and you rented it out, you treat it as an investment property for at least 2 years. And then at some point in the future, you can convert that to your primary residence.
All right, good. As people are thinking about additional questions, feel free to hit those up on the Q&A. And my assistant has just brought a breaking news bulletin from Shoemaker Law. And yeah, this is high tech. This is from my very own assistant. That evidently there's an update on the infrastructure bill, so we can get to that whenever Jack is ready to do it. And I'll still be monitoring the Q&A and also be paying attention to my assistant over here that's bringing me new breaking news. Jack.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't want to interrupt too much. It actually literally came about 2 minutes ago. So I'm happy to put the link to the article. But so we have, at Shoemaker, it's called Shoemaker Advisors, separate legal entity, but they deal with, and I've sent clients who have had issues that need help with, need some influence literally on Capitol Hill on certain things. And so very fortunate to have that. But one of our friends over on that side of the firm sent an update, and it has graphs and it has charts and all kinds of stuff. So I have not read it completely because I didn't want to get distracted, because I'm very interested in what Matt has to say. So I can publish a link to that in the chat, or however you want to,
Yeah,
Gary,
let's do that.
That
Yeah,
way
let's just
we
do
can
that.
continue onward. And then if people have questions about that stuff, we can deal with that later or at another time.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
That's one of the blessings of high tech things, like, getting Post-it notes given to you on breaking news. Pony Express just arrived at my house. So anyway, Matt, this is really good stuff. Any additional questions out there? We've had some really good ones so far. Anything else, like, back to just, and I realize this is speculation, but, with the questions that you're being hounded by daily on, probably more like timing issues, I would imagine, trying, for you to be the fortune teller that you're not necessarily. Talk to us a little bit about, those discussions that are happening out there.
So the idea that the Senate is now talking about another change to the 1031 like-kind exchange tax code. Is, again, it's not surprising. It's basically on the chopping block every single year, and we're very fortunate to have the FEA, which is our trade association, who is a strong lobbying piece, and we have a tremendous amount of other trade associations going from the American Sugar Beet Growers Association to the NAR and folks in between, Sierra Club and others who are affected greatly by any change or impact that would come from 1031 like-kind exchanges. So right now, the big question is it going to happen? I mean, that is the big one. And listen, three are much more well-spoken on that side than I am. And I don't know. Is there a likelihood it can? Absolutely. You know, reconciliation is the piece that we worry most about because it takes what we hope is a balance and it kind of throws it out the window for either party. And they can push through a lot of changes that maybe would not be accepted by the full legislation or by all of our legislators. So we are hopeful that we have enough moderate Democrats and certainly those who personally have taken effect of 1031s, their families, their companies, their businesses, and their constituents who are great beneficiaries of the tax code, that they will not want to push across this change. So we have great lobbying efforts. We have great friends on the Hill, and we are hopeful. I think I think we're kind of positive about it as well. But we'll see how that goes. And I just have to keep a positive attitude every day, because if there is a change in the tax code that limits or puts a limit on or caps the portion that can be deferred, or if it's done away with altogether, then that changes my every day. So I have a dog in this fight. Second greatest question is, well, Matt, should I exchange now or should I just pay taxes? And that's a very valid question. And thankfully, we are able to turn around and say, listen, you really need to talk to your advisor, not only because you're considering a 1031, but when it comes to your overall investment strategy, your overall tax scenario, your eventual, what's your 20, 30-year plan from now? That's a hard question to ask and for me to answer. So once they talk to their advisor, we've had a lot of different responses. We've certainly had some CPAs who have said, listen, go ahead, pay your tax now. We have no idea what the capital gains rates are going to be in 4 or 5 years. And you know what? We don't have no idea. We have others who are saying, listen, do it now. What if the tax code does change, or what if they do go away? So go ahead and do your exchange now, take effect of it, go out and buy your replacement property, and then we'll see what happens. And we have others who are certainly planning a strategy based on this $500,000 cap on deferral of gains, who are looking and talking with their taxpayers and saying, listen, when you go out and buy replacement property, go out and buy multiple properties, go out and buy smaller properties, so that if you do experience a gain, maybe they can be closer to that $500,000 cap than going out and buying a large property that may well exceed that cap. So there's a lot of talk going on right now. Who's right, who's wrong? I'm not really sure. But what I do know is there are a lot of brilliant real estate attorneys, CPAs, accountants, and advisors who will find the legal and ethical way to still make sure their taxpayers, their advisees are able to do what it is they need to do.
Well, that's why we have Adam Boatsman and Jack Santaniello on this call. And that's why we've been doing 73 weeks of this. So, I would want them in my foxhole if I was doing that for sure. And especially after knowing you and hearing more about kind of your track record and considering the quality of the introduction from Brian Red, I understand why he was so passionate about making sure that we got introduced. Here's another question that just came in. What services do a qualified intermediary provide?
So what the qualified intermediary's role plays out in serving as an independent third party to the transaction. So we are a necessary part of a 1031, being that when the taxpayer sells, the money is sitting in the attorney's escrow account and it cannot go to the taxpayer. So the taxpayer cannot have constructive receipt of the sale proceeds from the property. So it needs to go to someone like myself. So we are actually the ones who put the 1031 agreement in place with the taxpayer. We hold the funds from the sale. We work with the taxpayer, making sure they understand the rules of 1031, time frames that they are under. They identify potential replacement property to us, and we hold those funds until such time when they buy the replacement property, and we disperse those to the closing agents to make sure that those funds are ready and available, and again, have not touched the taxpayer's hands so that they can truly be deferred. So we're just there to make sure the rules are followed from the 1031 standpoint.
Yeah, that's really good. Something that you had said in our conversation that I think is worth repeating, and because I didn't really know, we've made referrals to intermediaries occasionally here and there, but if we had a client that didn't have one, et cetera. Well, now I've got one in our backyard, with you. So that's awesome. But something that you had said was if somebody has questions and needs some guidance as you're going through this, if you correct me if I'm misread this or misheard this, but what I heard from you was, hey, we're here to help. We aren't going to fee you up. It's a modest fee on the back end when it's actually consummated. Mm-hmm. It was under $2,000, I think. Right. Can you verify and clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we are not able to do, and I'll address that first as a qualified intermediary, we cannot offer tax or legal advice. Again, the qualified intermediary cannot be considered as an agent of the taxpayer in any way, shape, or form. And so that's why your attorneys, your close advisors, they cannot serve in the role of QI because they are an agent of the taxpayer. So though we cannot provide tax or legal advice, we can certainly walk through scenarios. We can walk through the IRS regulations when it comes to 1031s, and we can have a broad range talk about the things that we've seen, about IRS rulings, about cases that have come out that may pertain to their situation, and not only have that conversation with the taxpayer, but also have that conversation with their advisor so that we are sure that they are receiving their tax and legal advice from those they most trust. But yes, my phone rings most of the day, as our office does, with people calling just about maybe they have a simple question. They don't want to call their advisor and maybe have them bill them for a few minutes of conversation. But what we do outside of actually handling the transaction when it comes to the conversations we have, those are certainly free. And really, it's kind of the fun part of what we do. We get to meet people, find out what their overall tax strategy is, and see how we can be of best help to them.
I love it. Thank you. So I also found out one little bit of trivia in talking with Matt that Adam and I, and Jack, maybe you too, I don't know, but Adam's a Oklahoma native. I'm a Kansas native. And I think both of us have spent some time on farms. I know I have, and Matt has as well. And one of the things that we were talking about how wonderful the weather was out today. It feels like, September, not early August, but you said something about cattle would kind of twist their tail and then they would run, and you called them Kawasaki's. I
Yeah,
figured Jack
so-
would like that.
Yeah, so, the beautiful thing of seeing these calves, they get excited and they kick their heels up and play, and they'll kind of kink their tail up a little bit and take off down through the field. And so, yeah, we would call them Kawasaki's because they just took off like motorcycles down through the field. And that was kind of a morning, brought that to mind this morning on this cool, wonderful morning.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's another reason why I think I clicked with you immediately. There was just like no pretension, and then find out, oh yeah, you spent some time on a farm too. So that kind of makes sense. So,
Absolutely.
and we have plenty of clients too that have had some rural roots at some point in their life too, which is kind of cool. So, Jack, any thoughts on this bipartisan bill that you've kind of read through? You've done some speed reading through.
Yes. Well, I also want to share that I had my father-in-law grew up in Kansas and literally rode a horse to school uphill in the snow. And so
Both ways.
Both ways. And the horse's name was Jack. So, and we have his saddle in my house. So it's
really?
cool. Yeah, absolutely. It's a Western saddle, but yes. So I actually, cool. I don't know if you can share or give me the ability to share a screen, but I zoomed in this chart and actually has where the money's going and where it's supposedly coming from. And I can put that up on the screen.
Yeah, you've got it.
All right, hold on one second. And it's in that article that we can publish as a link to, but all right, let's see. All right. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So basically we're talking about $550 billion. And so there's the allocation of where the money is intended on going. And so that $27.5 billion is, kind of a lot where the negotiation discussion is kind of going in, but also, the fact that they have allocated $110 billion doesn't necessarily, for roads and bridges, doesn't necessarily mean that that is actually how it's going to end up going. There's still discussions within each little bucket within transportation, other infrastructure. Then where it's coming from, you can see where it all comes from. And I think this is one of the biggest rubs in the wrong way that, wait a minute, you're telling me there's $205 billion in unused COVID relief funding. And I have clients, I think you guys have clients that have not received all of the funding, or for example, in hospitality, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that got shut off, and that, I have one client that is a minority business owner, female woman business owned, that was within that first 2 weeks of time, but everybody threw their stuff into the hat. She thought she had priority, and turns out that she didn't. And so she got in line where she actually got in line, because as we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that was deemed unfair discrimination. And so there is the spending, and there's other sections in this publication that go specifically into clean hydrogen. And so this is pretty good detail, actually. Like I said, it just came out maybe 20 minutes ago from my friends at Shoemaker Advisors. So we'll publish that. I don't know if you want to publish the link here.
I put it in the chat.
Did you? Okay.
So anybody that's on here still, please grab that from the chat, copy it, paste it to your clipboard, do whatever. But yeah, that's pretty good. It's kind of interesting, this kind of the blend of the new technology and the old technology, like boom, post-it note, and then it's kind of cool.
There was a question on Jeopardy the other night about the da and dots and does, or whatever the actual official name for the that is. And,
oh yeah. Dot.
Yep.
And
I got it. My kids
question?
didn't know. It's like, what was the telegraph? So it's yeah. So it was like the $100 question in the whole grid of things. So it was the easy one in communications, but the kids didn't know. I did. I didn't say anything because sometimes you just don't want to say anything to show how old you really are. So I just kept my mouth shut.
Isn't there a speakeasy on the backside of Park Road Shopping Center called ...
There might be. Yeah, I think you're right.
because Jeff Wolfberg's wife, who's this amazing artist, she's got a painting in there. I've only been in there once. I was like, whoa. And I was so captivated by the painting. I really didn't care about the speakeasy, but I think it's called ... And Cindy McGuffin. Is that right? Hopefully that's right. Hopefully you're answering. It's good to see you here, Cindy.
Yeah, it's interesting that.
All right.
Yep, I think that's right. There was a room in 820, which is next to VBGB in the Music Factory, and it was a room that was built. It's a secret room, so it's like a bookcase, and you have to know where the handle is. And when you go inside, it was designed to be a very kind of miniature, kind of speakeasy kind of feel to it. And it had, well, they had a jukebox in there, but they actually had a record player in there with old records and the shelves and like these old books. And
cool.
It was very cool. Of course, I don't know. I think they're only open for special events at this point. But it was very cool to go in there and it's like, yeah, okay, just have a seat and chat and, you know, see if other people can find the secret door handle. So
that's pretty cool. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It's always fun with these guys. It's always fun to have somebody that knows what they're talking about, that's in a, you know, kind of tangential but complementary space, because you know, definitely affects Jack's clients, affects our clients. And we're going to continue to try to make sure that we bring in people like Matt that have some expertise and stuff that you know, we want to learn from as well. So I think another one definitely that we need to think about doing, and Adam, you can give me a yes or no on this, but I think Jack Schmall with state and local tax issues, again, you know, that seems to be, I don't know, it just seems to be an area of gotcha that's more and more prevalent because the states keep changing rules, and a lot of times clients don't know, they, you know, and we've seen coming from other folks where they're like, no, we're good. We've been told we're good. Well, until somebody starts rapping on their door and realizes that, you know, they're getting hit with fines and penalties and they weren't so good. So just another one of those areas that I think we'll probably want to have teed up here sooner rather than later too. But
and Gary, that's a great point in that a lot of, there's still a lot of presumption that if you are shipping goods from your state to another state, that you don't have to collect sales tax. And then it's the end user, the end consumer's responsibility to pay use tax. I don't know if I've ever paid use tax on anything, you know, but I know that I have been charged by out-of-state providers of goods, and I get a sales tax bill, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm not a resident of that state. So you know, those things do come up, and it could be a pretty large situation if you're shipping a lot of stuff out, especially in today's environment of e-commerce and automation and just, you know, shipping things out. So that'd be a great topic to talk about, because I think that if you're on the wrong end of that presumption, then it can create some significant financial challenges for that business owner.
My assistant just brought me another Post-it note, IRS news, breaking news that they just heard on this webinar that you haven't paid use tax. You might be getting a call from them.
Well, it'd be the state of North Carolina, so there you go.
Oh, there you go.
See, my wife's right. I talk too much sometimes.
Speaking of assistants, I really like the shaggy professor, you know, on your couch, Matt. That is it. English sheepdog? No, what is it?
Sheepdog. Yes, she has been very quiet, so I'm very appreciative of that. But I need to have at least something cute pop up in the picture.
Yeah, really cute. That's awesome, man. All right, hey, and Matt, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how do they best find you?
So you can best find me. Our website is Banker Exchange or bankers1031.com. You can best reach me on my cell phone. And listen, I'm very happy to give that to you. It's 336-813-4157. Again, 336-813-4157. Call me anytime. It's a priority of mine to make sure I have my phone on and I'm always available. So I look forward to talking to you. Anybody has a question or a follow-up from today even, that's what I'm here for. And I certainly look forward to those calls.
Yeah, this is really good. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat too. So it's in the chat, y'all. 336-813-4157. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir. You've got it.
And bankers1031.com.
You got it.
Awesome. Well, this is probably the least we've heard from Adam, which is actually kind of a bummer for me because like you always provide entertainment. I really enjoy it and I'm serious about it. And Jack, you know, it's always good to hear from you too. I'm surprised you didn't sneak a dad joke in there. Do you got one?
I'll let it go this time because the ones that I've been reading are not that great. At least I know they're not going to go well. So I'll keep my mouth shut again.
That's a statement right there, because if you're saying they're not that great, yeah, that means they're really bad. So.
Well, I test them out at home. That's my proving ground now. Is like if I don't even get a little bit of a laugh from the one adult and the two teenagers, then I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna bother.
Yeah. Forget about it.
I'll save it for next time.
Crash and burn.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, for anybody that is came on here late and missed the first part of this, we will be up on the BGW YouTube channel. So BGW CPA YouTube, it'll be up this afternoon. Thank you again, Matt. Really appreciate you being with us. Jack and Adam, always a pleasure having you guys on. Y'all have a great day. Get out there. It's so beautiful. Enjoy it. See y'all.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Matt.
Bobby, thank you very much.